Let's learn how to use lists and tuples to create data frames in pandas. Now, before I move on, if lists and tuples sounds unfamiliar to you, or if sequence and compound type sounds unfamiliar, I do recommend you check out the description below because there are some links there that you can use to learn more before we move on. I'm going to assume that you kind of know what those things are and then keep going. Right, so we have a pandas data frame, and what a pandas data frame is going to contain is columns and rows. The columns are going to describe what it means to be a row, and a row is going to be an example of the thing that the columns are trying to describe. So a more concrete example would be, let's say we want to describe the crew members of a starship, right? We would have columns that describe what it means to be a crew member, and the rows would be the individual crew members of the starship. Let's start out with the columns. Right, so ship columns is going to be a list of column names that will be the columns of our data frame. I think we should have a crew ID, first name, and a position. And with that information, we're actually ready to create a data frame. It just won't contain any actual crew members, but we will have the columns that we just created. So here, we're calling the dataframe function on pandas, and we're setting its columns parameter equal to the columns that we just created using the ship columns list. When I run this, we get an empty data frame, right? But we do have the columns that we're interested in. We have crew ID, first name, and position. So with that, we're ready to enter some actual crew members into the rows of our data frame. As was the case with the columns, we're going to be using a list. But it is going to be slightly different from the columns because we're not going to be storing strings. We're going to be storing tuples. So the first crew member, we'll give them an ID, let's say 22, a first name of, why not, Spock, and a position of science officer. All right. And the second crew member, let's set the ID equal to a string. No particular reason, I just want to show you that it's possible to do this. An ID equal to 12, first name Kirk, first name Captain. I mean, if this was an ideal situation, I wouldn't use a string for the ID. I'd want to stay consistent. But in the real world, you might, run into data that looks like this. What I'm trying to say is it's not going to break the data frame. So even if it is a little bit inconsistent, I'm just showing you that data frames will still work even though a column contains rows of different data types. Right, and so our final and third crew member, let's give them an ID of 45, a first name of Uhura, and she's the communications officer. Cool, so we have our crew members. In order to enter these crew members into the data frame, we set its data parameter equal to our list of tuples. When I run this, you can now see that we do have a data frame and it contains the data that we're interested in. Spock has the crew ID of 22, the first name of Spock, and the position of the science officer. So great, it seems like it worked. Now before we move on, there's something that I would like to mention. Notice how we're using tuples. That might seem weird to a couple of you, but there is a really good reason for doing so. When you use a tuple, you're storing things that are conceptually different from each other, right? So an ID is a completely different thing from a first name, and a first name is a completely different thing from a position. So there's no reason to loop through them. There's no reason to apply some kind of operation to them. There's no reason to change their order. I mean, we could put position in front of first name and nothing would change about our data. We could even put the ID in the end. I mean, fundamentally, the data would be the same. So there's no reason to change the tuple, and that's why tuples are immutable. They contain information that will not need to change. And the most common situation when that happens is when you have elements that are just fundamentally different from each other. And that's actually the situation we have when we create a data frame using lists. Having said that, it is possible to create rows in a data frame using a list of lists. And I'm going to show you how to do it. I just don't recommend you do it. So we reset our crew member, so it's now a list of lists. And when I rerun this, we get the exact same result. The point is, like, this code is less clear. It's not as good code because when the reader reads this, you know, they got to wonder, oh, there's a list here. Can I loop through them? Is there something that I should be doing to them to fundamentally change what they are? There's no real reason to do so, and that's why it's better to store it in a tuple. It's kind of a good way of communicating something to the readers of your code while you're doing it. In fact, I'm going to delete this just so it doesn't confuse us further. Another thing that might happen when you're working in real-life data, by the way, is you might have something that looks like this. So you might have a CSV file where the first row contains values for all the columns. That's great. But then the second row has missing values, and those are not expressed as anything in the CSV file. If we run this, it doesn't break our data frame, but it does give us kind of a weird result, because now Kirk's ID is equal to his first name, and his first name is equal to his position, whereas the position is none. And we know this not to be true. We know there's a position and a first name, so we've corrupted our data without breaking the data frame, and that is actually kind of dangerous because you can get like weird results in your analyses without knowing why. So just if this situation happens to you, make sure that you have some kind of value for each column that you're interested in analyzing, even if it's an empty string, like in my example here. If we rerun this now, okay, we still have no crew ID, and that could be a problem, but at least first name and position are now in the right columns. So having said all of this, you're ready to create pandas data frames using lists and tuples.